I'm going to give a short or brief introduction to Zela. Zela is, currently likes to describe herself as a pianist and a composer, as she believes that that is what best describes her as a musician. And when I was studying Zela as a person a little more, or when I was studying your career or your musical journey a little more, I actually found out how much we have in common, Zela. Both of us have been born in one country, then studied in a different country, then grew up in a different country, and now live and work in a different country. I suppose we have a similar past because of being an Armenian, I suppose, because all Armenians tend to be all over the place. But our connection also was music, because it was through music that I came to Armenia from Europe, where I lived. And it was thanks to music that I decided to be mainly based in Armenia. So you were born in Lebanon, in Beirut, where you actually from an early age, at the age of 4, you started playing the piano in classical format. I'm just going to add another person who wished to join us, and we can continue. After that, you continue studying music in Lebanon. Oh, 1 second, I just need to mute somebody, and that's it. And your passion for music, as well as your career choice or your path in life, brought you back to Armenia, where you studied the conservatoire. And I can only imagine those years, because when I first came to Armenia and started living here, as you so eloquently put, it was all about music and art. And it is so true. Yerevan is truly a city of art and music. And not a day goes by where you can go to theater or music, or there are times when there are 2 or 3 concerts at the same time of the highest quality. So I fully understand how you felt when you were in Armenia. Then obviously your passion for music didn't stop there, because you discovered a new passion, which was jazz, which then also took you back to Sydney. Not back, but took you to Sydney, actually. Yeah. Took you to Sydney. And then you started the conservatoire there, and where you currently also reside. And you continue your work with Zela Margossian Quintet. Now, I did cramp all of it in one paragraph, I suppose, but we're going to elaborate a paragraph by paragraph, or a chapter by chapter of your life. And I think I'm going to give you the liberty to choose yourself where you would like to start, because it doesn't have to be chronicle, and it can be from perhaps the most memorable times of your life, or perhaps even from now. So it's up to you. But it is very obvious to me that you knew very, very early how much you love music and how much you want to be with music. But perhaps if you could tell me, when was the first time when you, as be it a young child or a young adult or a young woman, realized that music was your life mission? Is there a moment in your life that you remember?
I don't remember a specific time or a period or an age where I really realized that I wanted to become a musician, because music was part of my life throughout since I was a little girl. From the stories that Mom tells me, because I don't remember as I was 4, she says I was very adamant. I used to come home. I went to school very early in Beirut. I was 2.5. So she said, you used to come back home and tell me about your teacher who accompanied you when the kids are singing. And she said you were mesmerized by her and you wanted to play just like Mrs. Zarmine. And finally she got me a keyboard, and she said I used to come up with the tunes by ear. And finally, she succumbed, and she got me a second-hand upright piano at 4. And I really remember that, like, you know how vividly you remember holding the door when the removalists were bringing the piano up the stairs, I saw it was so big because I was tiny. So I remember I ran to my mom and I said, it's scary. And Mrs. Zarmine started teaching piano when I was 4. So after that, I think mom tells me that I didn't complain at all to practice. Like, I really enjoyed practicing. When I became a teenager, obviously I was interested in other things as well. I used to love playing basketball, really love playing basketball. I was very sportsy, like I used to love sports. And I played because I was stubborn. If I wanted to do something, I just went ahead and did it. So I played basketball for a while playing piano and practicing. But towards the end, like when I had to choose if I wanted to become a member of a team and compete, I had to make a choice because of my fingers to just stick to piano. But I think the reason I knew that I wanted to become a musician is that music was the best thing I knew how to do. Like it was the only thing I instinctively felt that I know how to do. I used to love arts and like arts in general, everything in the field of arts, it was attractive to me. Right. But because I love music, and you know, when you're growing up as a teenager, you discover bands and or even in classical music, music made me feel whole. Or for example, if I was sad, there was that kind of music that soothed me. And it just ignited emotions in me, which I didn't know what they were, but I just felt the need that music should be in my life every day. I went to choirs. I really enjoyed singing in choirs, and this I owe it to my mom, because she was very she was there for me all the time, and she knew how musical I was. Yeah, very supportive. And although I said I wasn't I didn't whinge to practice, but she always reminded me to keep that routine going, especially when I grew older and I started playing more difficult repertoires. I myself knew that I have to dedicate minimum 4 hours of daily practice to piano. Yeah, so the Beirut years were like that, and I was very I had set a goal that I wanted to become a classical pianist when I grew older, and Europe was always my goal. Right. Until I went to Armenia with the Gargach choir. Actually, it's still active, founded by Zakhar Keshian. Right. I was their accompanist for several years, so it was the first time I went to Armenia in 2001. And it was such it was a turning point. It was very strange to me. When I went there, it just sort of it grows on you, because although we read literature, we knew about, my piano teachers were, the last 2 were from Armenia. So I was very much in touch with the music, with even the language, Eastern Armenian. I knew I could understand. So when I went there, it was strange, but not strange. So it was my first visit. I'm telling you about my first visit. And when I went back to Beirut, I was studying English literature at Haigazian University because I loved reading. So I think I mainly studied literature because I loved reading. I don't write that well, but I loved reading. And at the same time, I continued my studies at the Lebanese Conservatorium, because I had graduated from Parsel Ganachian Musical College. But when I went to Beirut, I said to my mom, that's it, I'm going to study in Armenia. Yeah. And a few months later, I was in Yerevan.
I don't blame you, because it was very similar for me as well when I came to Armenia after having grown up in Europe and imagining that I could never live in Armenia. And as you said, it kind of, growing up, I wasn't very much, I grew up as a European teenager. And although I was Armenian and I knew I was Armenian and I was proud of it, I wasn't necessarily also Armenian. And I remember when I first came to Armenia with Music of Armenia, it was so different yet so much like home.
Yes.
I had never felt like at home anywhere else. And I remember on the day of my flight, it was 1st of March. I remember it like today. I was sitting at a cafe in Yerevan, and there was a tiny demonstration about something. And I remember secretly wishing that that demonstration would somehow block something that would make it hard for me to get to the airport, and I wouldn't have to fly back to London. So I know exactly what you mean. And to come to Armenia through music or with music, I think that makes it even more so beautiful. And once you come to Armenia because of music or even art, let's not undermine any other art form, I think you never leave.
No, yes, very true. Yeah, that's because I have so many great memories from my first trip. One of them is, unfortunately, it's a sad memory now, because the Gargaç Erçahomp in Beirut, the same founder had founded Varanta Erçahomp in Shushi for years. And so the choir members were buddies. They used to write letters to one another, so they knew each other. So the first meeting was at Razan Chetot's church, and they sang Yerazimir Gir while joining together the two choirs. Right. And it was a very emotional day back then and now, because we all know why. But yeah, so many good memories from that trip. And when I started living in Yerevan, I was all by myself. I don't have a family in Yerevan, like from my family side. But the first 3 months, I can't say it was difficult, but it was the most difficult out of the 5 or 6 years I've lived in Yerevan. Quickly, especially the diasporic Armenians, you know, you tend to come together. And I think mainly because back then there were internet cafes. we didn't have mobile phones. They didn't exist there. So we used to hang out there, and that's how I made my circle. And I have made some very good friends in Armenia, which they're like lifetime friends, because all of them were either musicians or painters or filmmakers. So very special.
Zela, you mentioned the cathedral in Shushi, which, as you suspect, brings me to one of your compositions called Ceasefire. Now, Ceasefire has double importance perhaps for you, because of obviously you living in Lebanon and constantly being under attacks and living in a country of political instability. And as well as recently, every Armenian went through another horrific event, which was the war over Nagorno-Karabakh. And the word ceasefire is also very close to my heart, because I was in Armenia during the war, and the amount of times that the ceasefire was broken, the amount of time that we were disappointed, it was just too unbearable. So why don't we perhaps give a short introduction to the track, and then we'll play the track for our audience.
Yes, very shortly. So when I wrote Ceasefire, I always write the compositions through, like, a riff comes to mind, or a rhythmic pattern, or a line of musical idea. So when that line, that one came up, I just said, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna call this or this composition, but let me compose it. And then it just reminded me of the Ceasefire jingle on the radio in Beirut. So whenever we heard sort of like catchy, suspenseful line of that jingle, we used to go up on the street and play soccer or whatever with the kids. So that's why I wrote it. Ceasefire and the joy of a child wanting to play peacefully. And now it took a double meaning because of the war in Artsakh and Armenia. And we kept here as well. We were locked to the screens watching the Armenian news. Ceasefire, ceasefire, and it's not happening. So we dedicated this tune to to Armenia and Artsakh during the war.
absolutely beautiful. Can you tell us a bit more where it was recorded and who the musicians are? Was this Zela Margossian Quintet?
Yes, that was Zela Margossian Quintet. This track is from our first debut album, which we released in November 2018.
Right.
And this track was the most popular one. It was picked up by a jazz playlist on Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
So I was shocked because I could see the numbers going up, and I didn't understand what's happening until I found out that, oh, we're on a playlist. So yeah, that's from the album Transition.
And it was probably a transition period in your life, right?
Yes, that was deliberately called Transition because I'll talk briefly about this. So basically, I studied classical performance in Armenia, and I never regret that because that was the sort of the basis and foundation of which I built what I'm doing now on. And I had the privilege to learn from the best in Armenia. My piano mentor was Professor Zela Margossian, and lots of other teachers that, if I mentioned that, I loved so many of my teachers at the cons. So throughout my journey in Armenia, I learned so much. Not only I was nurtured in music, but in general as a human being, living all by myself in Armenia, establishing connections, knowing what's important in life and what I like in life. That was the journey of self-discovery which Armenia offered, because it just consolidated everything that I think I loved. But you know, sometimes you discover something else and you realize that that's your passion. For me, it was more, I discovered that, to be honest, it was more of I became a better human being when I lived in Armenia, because there were lots of things that became less important for me in life, because I learned that the most basic things that we have can make us happy. And that's how we lived in Armenia. As a student, I was happy, and we had nothing. Like we went, I went to my classes, and then when I finished, we just gathered together with all my other friends with just a platter of cheese and bread, tomatoes and cucumber, and we were really happy. Or we went dancing, or we went dancing with just a t-shirt and a jeans. You know, it was. So what I'm saying is that material things doesn't matter.
Yeah,
so and the personal connections I made, and the humility of my teacher, for example, Zela Margossian. You learn from your teachers, so it was very humbling for me to be taught by someone who is that great a master and humble at the same time. Mm-hmm. And throughout my years in Armenia, obviously I tried really hard to practice well, to keep up with the students, the Armenian students who were nurtured in the Russian school. And I, coming from Middle East, Beirut, Lebanon, I knew that I played well, but I knew that I could play even better. So I had to really focus. Mm-hmm. And throughout those years, because some of my friends were playing in the folk fusion jazz bands, right. So I got introduced to the Armenian Navy band, Arto Tunçbayacan and Vahagen Hayrabedian and Gaduner. And I remember when I used to go to these performances or shows, I used to come out full of energy, and I loved the fusion of Armenian traditional music with jazz harmonies. And when I was in Beirut, I didn't know anyone who loved jazz, or in my family there was no one who was a jazz aficionado or anything. So when I went to Armenia, I discovered jazz at the same time. So right. But it was very intimidating for me to take the step to start studying jazz, because I thought it would compromise my practice regimen in classical music, and it was important for me. So I decided to go all the way and finish my degree. But throughout that period, until I graduated, I somehow knew that I wouldn't enjoy my life just being a classical performer. It was just not meant for me. And I really admire my friends who are fully dedicated and knew that they could just do it. I just didn't, it wasn't about not being able to, it just didn't satisfy my soul. And I just wanted to do something more creative and as a collective. I love working with people and creating music together. Yeah, so that's how I didn't do anything about it until I moved to Sydney. It was like not a blank slate, but it just gave me that opportunity to think. It took a lot of time for me to give myself the permission. Imagine practicing daily throughout your life, classical repertoires, making them perfect, being so critical. But then I said one day, no, I said, it's never too late. But I told myself, if I have to do this, I'm going to do it the whole way. I'm not going to try and see how it is. I said, no, I'm going to start doing it and doing it properly. Because I said, I love music so much. And I know that I can do something that I really enjoy in music. But it took several years for me to get to what I'm doing now. So I guess one of my my goals as well is to inspire younger women as well, younger or whatever age they're at. Yeah, because you have to do what makes you happy. Absolutely. In life, and it's never too late. Never too late.
I absolutely agree with you. It's never too late. I also had a change of a career, and I think sometimes you think one thing, but then it takes time until you realize where you really need to be. And I think with music, it doesn't matter what genre you perform, as long as you perform music, and as long as you perform the type of music that is closest to your heart. And so I think for you to get to that point, you had to go through all the stages that you went through, because also having this strong classical training gave you the basis, maybe even for composition, because then you also started composing, you know. And I think that is a great advantage, understanding music technically as you do, and then being able to mix it with jazz so freely. Perhaps sometimes it is a complication, and sometimes maybe it's not. It's an advantage. So you established or set up Zela Margossian Quintet in 2017. But do you remember when was the first time you started composing? If there is a time when you kind of think, okay, this piece was the first piece that I composed.
Yes. I when I started going to the Sydney Conservatorium, my mentor, who was the first year mentor, was Judy Bailey, who's one of the well-known female jazz pianists here in Sydney and New Zealand. I'm very lucky because she always encouraged me to include my culture in my music. Right. So I was always hesitant. I said, because we have concert practice like performances at the con. So when you're studying in the jazz performance course, throughout the semester, you have to do 2 concert pracs. So which is you present either your works or you present a jazz standards of your choice. So when Judy Bailey said, okay, let's do 1 concert track, I said, what am I playing? Because till now, I don't feel comfortable playing jazz standards because it just takes time to evolve and to have the experience. So what I play is the fusion music, which I grew accustomed to in Armenia. Anyway, she said, no, you have to play your own music. I said, okay. So I composed a tune then, which was The Child in Me, which is based on Zapik Zapik Zirani right. and Jan 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 Karune. And the reaction from the students and the audience was so captivating. They were happy, they were so encouraging. And then I said, okay, let me give it another go. I composed Alik. And we recorded those 2. I said, I'm just going to record them just to see what's going to happen. And that's how the quintet was formed. So I just asked some of the people I knew through performing and some of my friends from the con. So that's how we got together.
So one thing gave birth to another thing.
Yes, and then those 2 tracks whenever we performed, we had gigs. People loved it, and I said, okay, let me continue doing this. And my compositional method is not by the book at all. So because I've heard a lot of music, not only classical, everything. I used to love every kind of music, which was good. So that's why when they label my music, I think it's somewhat wrong because it doesn't adhere to one genre.
Right. Yeah.
For me, it's like a mix of jazz, classical, and folk elements, because I hear a lot of Armenian in my head, so that's how I compose.
Well,
them.
it is clear in your music as well, in your work, that you do have the Armenian folk music influence is very vividly visible in your work. And Zela, I think with that, as well as with establishing Zela Margossian Quintet, you became very popular in the jazz scene in Australia, and very quickly you were picked by online media. Articles were being written by you as the newest hottest thing in jazz, as well as you took part in several jazz festivals. The one that I remember most was the one, the Women's Jazz Festival in Australia. And since we are wrapping up Women's Musical Month, I just because I don't separate eggs, I don't see women and men as different species, especially when it comes to music. I just see human beings performing music. But what is really kind of what I'm curious about is there a difference when you perform at a festival where there's just women, be it good or bad? What's the atmosphere like?
No, there's no difference at all. I think the only reason they organize the women jazz festivals is to just give opportunities for women to perform. I think in the Sydney Festival lineup, the band leaders are women, right, and the band doesn't have to be all women. Mm-hmm. So, for example, when I picked my band, I didn't pick them because they were male. It just happened that I knew them. So if I knew any other, so it doesn't make any difference for me. And yeah, no, I agree with you. Especially in music, and I grew up feeling like that too. That it was a matter of being able to do it or not because I'm a woman, I can't do it. Yeah.
Zela, when I asked you to choose music for me to play today, you chose Ceasefire and Adana. Now, both of them are very much connected to Armenia. Both of them are very much connected to a certain pain or memory. I suppose this is the cliche of a diaspora Armenian, I suppose, if cliche is the right word, because I also, having grown up in Europe, even now being mainly based in Armenia, I still, every chance I get, I call it my Armenia, my Yerevan, my Ararat, kind of like someone is going to take it away from me, and I need to stress it very strongly. And it is very, very clear to me that you're very proud of your roots and you were very happy to be in Armenia. And I have a feeling that at some point music is going to bring you back to Armenia for maybe a long time, if not permanently. And perhaps as an artist, as most of the Armenian artists always speak about the topics of, be it the earthquake, the genocide, or or Artsakh. I suppose my question is it the same with you? Did you feel like you had to speak about these topics? For example, with Adana, because obviously the name already suggests a very, very, very serious and important topic to our hearts. The massacre of Adana, we all know this. So did you feel that you had to speak about it through your music because you felt that the topic had to be discussed with your audiences, or because the pain was so deep within you that you had to express it for your art? Which one do you think it was?
I think it was both. Like I think during the war, I obviously, as every Armenian, I was so frustrated because no one was reciprocating. I very seldomly put political things on or posts on my page. I just don't like it. But this time it was inevitable. I had to speak out and just show at least my friends in Australia or the musicians to what's happening. Many of them reacted and they messaged me. But in general, I just felt like the world doesn't care. And I said, the only thing I can do is play music, which is connected to it. And also I chose Adana because my great-grandparents from my father's side are from Adana. So it was very special and meaningful for me. And I said, if I can just leave goosebumps or some kind of an emotion in the audience, that's something, you know. So that's why we performed it at the jazz festival. I was full of, I remember that night. We had cameras all of set up next to us. Usually you would get a bit more nervous or aware that there are cameras. That night I just didn't care at all. I forgot that there are cameras because I was so worked up about what's happening in Armenia that and the only thing that was on my mind when I was playing that was the soldier who was fighting, because I said, why should I be scared? I'm not in the shoes of that soldier fighting. That's scary. Why should I be scared? So that was very, I was still talking about it, makes me very like agitated but I'm so happy we did that track. And I'm very grateful that I have band members who support these issues and they always back me up. And they do their best to perform it in a way that is not too Western, or they adhere to that folk element as much as they can. Even they're not Armenians. For example, Stuart, the clarinet player, he emulates and, you know, understands what to do.
Wonderful. I think with that beautiful introduction and with the understanding what it meant to you, and you performed that track actually right during the war, during the recent war in Armenia. So I think we will be able to see from the video the emotions that you express for your music. So here it is.
The next piece we will be performing is called Adana. And I would like to dedicate this song to all of the people around the world who are facing atrocities because of wars which are imposed on them, and they are fighting for their right to exist and for the right to enjoy the things in life which we take for granted. I specifically would like to dedicate this song to my dear friend Jivan and his wife and his 3 kids who are in Armenia and Artsakh right now.
We are back. Although it's so difficult to come back from that because it was so mesmerizing and it just took me to a different world.
Thank you.
But it was. I think your pain was so clear, and you're right. Even though the musicians are not Armenian, the clarinet player beautifully replaced Duduk. I think it just did the trick just as well.
Yeah, he loves Armenian music and Middle Eastern music. So yeah, he's a great musician.
So he could get the melodies easily. Zela, please tell me a bit more about the albums that you have created with the quintet, because I know you have another one coming up soon.
Yes.
And hopefully we will be available online, and your fans will be able to hear your music, as well as you will be able to get new fans.
Yes, yeah, we just finished recording the second album just yesterday, so I feel really tired, but like at the same time energized today. We finished mixing as well. Now it's being mastered. It took a while because of the disruption of COVID in 2020. We were supposed to go to jazz festivals in 2020 to Malaysia, and there were other performances lined up for me, one in New York, but it never happened. So, but it's okay. I guess that was how it was meant to be. And then I took my time a little bit with this album because there was no rush, and I didn't want to push it because so far I have done everything according to how I feel about it. It's not like I'm doing this to prove something to someone. I have passed that phase, because when I used to play classical music, that sort of was part of my aim, was to please everyone and to do everything perfectly and interpret the pieces as they should be interpreted. But when I discovered this, that I can at least enjoy and create and compose, and the only reason I started, I think, composing was it was my only way to express myself, because I thought if I play a jazz repertoire, first of all, it's not going to sound as I know it should sound, because it doesn't come natural to you unless you have a really good bass and experience. So I said the best way, because I've listened so much to Armenian music and I've been influenced by Vagner Abedian, Arto's music, Datevi Kovannisyan, Levon Kardashian. So it's all in my head. So when I compose, I think that those are the influences that come in. And I said the best way for me to represent myself is through my music. If people like it, they like it. If they don't like it, they don't like it. That's it's a choice.
Of course.
And then I knew that when I released the first album, I released it without any expectations, and I'm being very honest, because I was so scared in a way to put myself out there, because it was very personal. Every track in it had a story behind it. But when it got picked up and the traction it received and the articles in Jazzwise magazine, Downbeat, my just mind exploded, because I wasn't expecting it, and it became more, I became anxious, and I said, oh my God, I have, now what am I going to do with the second album? But then I always remind myself to be true to yourself. Absolutely. And to write whatever you can write, because you can't push it. And one of my mentors here, Matt McMahon, always gives me the best advice. When I was complaining about my first album just before releasing it, he said, if you don't release this, or if you don't like it and don't release it, there won't be another first step for you to build on the second step. Right. Which is right, because this new album, I feel like I have evolved. The tracks, although they have the same signature, I think, but even my band members are saying that it's evolving and it's becoming interesting. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited now when we put it out. Let's see what happens. Yeah.
Can you give us the names of the albums so that when people want to search for it, they can find it?
Well, I mean, there's one now, which is the debut album, Transition. They can find all the tracks on YouTube. The record label has posted them up on Spotify, on Apple Music, on even Armenia. There's the music platform in Armenia too.
iMusic, I think, right?
Yeah, it's on that as well. And Bandcamp, there's the Bandcamp website where people can buy either the digital album or the real like physical copy. So the next album, I haven't named it yet, but most probably it will be called The Road, Janabar. So
Road.
Yeah.
As it is custom, I'm just going to ask if any of our audiences have any questions or comments to you. And in the meantime, as we're waiting for responses, is there anything else you would like to add, Zela Jan, so we know more about you, or if there's a message you'd like to give to your fans or to people around the world?
I think a message, I would like to give a message, just a humble message that that just going after what you enjoy in life is the most important thing. Even because when we work, that's the most amount of time we spend at work. So when you enjoy what you're doing, it just makes life happier. And I guess it was worth it for me to have a couple of hard years to transition, because it was really difficult to transition from classical to jazz, because people think that the dexterity of fingers when you have it, or the technique or sight reading or whatever, it's of course it's such a great feat to do all that, but the mind, that shifting that you need to do in jazz, because when I started, I used to hear the perfect sound, and my hands, in what came out of my hands was half of what that was. So you keep criticizing yourself because you know how the quality should be, but you just have to be patient. And every year I feel a difference. Of course, hard work, that goes without saying, that if you have to love something so much to go through that, and it's worth it when it is like that. And I know so many people would understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely, it is the exact same case in my case. And I think there's a saying, if you love your work, you will never work a day in your life.
Yes, exactly.
If I did quote it correctly. Right, since we didn't get any questions through the chat, I'm assuming our interview was very extensive and elaborative, and there was no need for that. I am going to thank you one more time, Zela Jan, for being part of Women's Musical Month 2021. As I mentioned at the beginning of our session, we do hope to have you part of Women's Musical Month next year with an actual concert. Please do subscribe and follow Music of Armenia on all the platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I can see, as I'm speaking, I can see the comments. I love you, Zela, and thank you. Your fans are thanking you. And I'd like to thank them for joining us today and for being part of this interview. And once again, happy 7th of April, and I wish everyone a nice day.
Thank you, Asmi. Thank you again for having me on. It's such a privilege. And I just want to send some regards to friends. I have friends on the Music of Armenia platform too. So if they will watch it afterwards, or even my friends from the conservatorium, special regards to everyone. And I hope I will be in Armenia soon.
Wonderful. Take care, Zela Jan.
You too.